Hofstadter's strange loops. Humphrey doesn't say much about the nature of this reverberating loop of sensation which he claims generates consciousness. When he does, however, he refers to Douglas Hofstadter's theory of the strange loop. Hofstadter defines a strange loop as, quote, not a physical circuit, but an abstract loop, in which, in the series of stages that constitute the cycling around, there is a shift from one level of abstraction or structure to another. A strange loop feels like an upwards movement in a hierarchy, and yet somehow the successive upward shifts turn out to give rise to a closed cycle. That is, despite one's sense of departing ever further from one's origin, one winds up, to one's shock, exactly where one had started out. In short, a strange loop is a paradoxical level-crossing feedback loop. Hofstadter emphasizes the abstract, mathematical rather than physical nature of strange loops, and consequently ourselves. Quote, the thesis of this book, he says, is that we ourselves, not our bodies but ourselves, are strange loops. End quote. As above, Hofstadter also emphasizes the conversion or elevation of raw fields to symbols as crucial to the generation of self and consciousness. He says, in any strange loop that gives rise to human selfhood, the level of perception, abstraction, and categorization are central, indispensable elements. It is the upward leap from raw stimuli to symbols that imbues the loop with strangeness. The overall gestalt shape of oneself, the stable whirl, so to speak, of the strange loop constitutes one's I, is not picked up by a disinterested neutral camera, but is perceived in a highly subjective manner through the active processes of categorizing, mental replaying, reflecting, comparing, counterfactualizing, and judging. End quote. Hofstadter tries to convey the peculiar mathematical nature of strange loops by describing how, in twisting back on itself, it violates the rules of hierarchy, which are deeply embedded in our minds. He states this as follows. A loop's strangeness comes purely from the way in which a system can seem to engulf itself through an unexpected twisting around, rudely violating what we had taken to be an inviolable hierarchical order. End quote. The origin of a lot of the ideas behind the concept of the strange loop, Hofstadter attributes to Gödel's theorem. Here is part of his attempt to explain this. Quote, if Gödel had concocted a self-affirming formula that cockily asserted of itself, this formula is not provable via the rules of Russell and Whitehead's Principia Mathematica, the strange loopiness resides not in the flip due to the word not, but in the unexpected, hierarchy-violating twisting back involving the word this. End quote. Hofstadter again insists that when I refer to a strange loop inside the brain, do I have in mind a physical structure, some kind of palpable closed curve, perhaps a circuit made of many neurons strung end to end? Could this neural loop be neatly excised in a brain operation and laid out on a table like a delicate pearl necklace for all to see? And would the person whose brain had thus been de-looped thereby become an unconscious zombie? And he concludes that, needless to say, that's hardly what I have in mind. The strange loop making up an I is no more a pinpointable, extractable physical object than an audio feedback loop is a tangible object possessing a mass and a diameter. Such a loop may exist inside an auditorium, but the fact that it is physically localized doesn't mean that one can pick it up and heft it, let alone measure such things as its temperature and thickness. An I loop, like an audio feedback loop, is an abstraction, but an abstraction that seems immensely real, almost physically palpable to beings like us. End quote.